I felt the familiar rumble of the Vanguard's engines beneath my feet as we sailed through a sector of empty space, the silence of the bridge interrupted only by the occasional beep of equipment. We were on a routine scouting mission, navigating through one of the many nebulas that littered this corner of the galaxy. Nothing unusual, just another quiet day of quiet work. Or so I thought. "Commander Kale," came Jonas' voice, low and even. He glanced at me, brown eyes steady. "Picking up a distress signal. 300 clicks away, bearing 012 by 346. I looked over, intrigued. "Any details?" "Signals Ulran, unencrypted." "That's odd." Jonas' fingers tapped across his console. "It's coming from somewhere within the nebula planetary coordinates." "An Ulran distress signal?" Finn piped up from behind us, turning around in his chair with his usual half-smirk. "Didn't think the Ulran ever needed help." I felt a prickle of caution at the back of my mind. The Ulran Empire wasn't known for broadcasting distress signals openly, especially not in the middle of a contested sector. They were as secretive as they were powerful. An unencrypted signal from them. That was either desperation or bait. "Jonah, you think it's a trap?" I asked. Jonas' mouth twitched in a rare smile. "Wouldn't be the first time the Empire tried something sneaky. But the signal's real. If it is a trap, they're not making much effort to hide it." I drummed my fingers against the armrest of my chair, feeling the hum of tension begin to build. An Ulran ship, in need of assistance. It wasn't in my nature to turn away from a distress call, even if it meant risking the crew. "Let's check it out," I said, making up my mind. "Finn, set course. Jonah, keep a close eye on that signal. If anything changes, let me know." It didn't take long before the planet came into view. Nestled deep within the nebula, its surface was obscured by swirling clouds of green and gold gases, giving it an otherworldly, almost eerie look. But that wasn't what caught my attention. "What the?" Finn muttered, his eyes wide as he peered through the viewing screen. The planet's atmosphere was thick with the blinking lights of combat ships, their engines flaring as they darted around each other in a deadly dance. I recognized the distinctive design of the Ulran ships, sleek, angular, and shimmering with energy shields. But their opponents were different, rougher, and far less uniform. Rebel ships, if I had to guess, probably the Thal. "A full-on war zone," Jonah murmured, his brow furrowed. As if on cue, the Vanguard's communication console crackled to life. "Attention, unidentified vessel," an authoritative voice boomed through the speakers, laced with a hint of urgency. "This is Commander Versh of the Thal Rebellion. You are entering a restricted conflict area. Declare your allegiance or vacate the sector immediately." "Doesn't look like we'll be sneaking in," I muttered. "Open a channel, Jonah." The line hissed as it connected. "This is Commander Elias Kale of the Vanguard, a human scout vessel. We're here responding to a distress call. No allegiance to either side." There was a pause before Commander Versh replied, his voice now tinged with suspicion. "A human ship. In this sector, either you're incredibly brave or impossibly foolish." "Maybe a bit of both," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "But we're not here to cause trouble. Just offering assistance if it's needed." "Understood, Commander Kale," Versh said, his tone softening, though I could still sense caution. "But if you get involved, you'll be putting yourselves at considerable risk. This battle is more than it seems." I glanced at Jonah, who gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. If we had any chance of understanding this conflict, it lay with the rebels, not the Ulran. "Understood," I said. "We'll keep our distance." For a while, we hovered on the outskirts of the battle, watching as the Ulran and Thal forces clashed. Explosions burst across the sky, lighting up the planet's atmosphere with streaks of fire and debris. Every now and then, an Ulran ship would catch sight of us and veer dangerously close before peeling away, unwilling to engage with a neutral party. I knew it was only a matter of time before someone took a shot. It happened faster than I expected. "Incoming fire," Jonah's voice was sharp, and I barely had time to react as a blast rocked the ship. "Shields at 70%, Finn called out, frantically checking his console. "They're targeting us, Commander." I cursed under my breath. We were a scout ship, not a war vessel, and any prolonged engagement would leave us as nothing more than debris. My instincts told me to pull back, but something else held me there, a gut feeling, a hunch that there was more at stake than I realized. "Commander Kale," came Versh's voice, unexpectedly back on the comm line. "If you're going to stick around, we could use some help." I hesitated, feeling the weight of the decision. Jonah was watching me, and I could tell he knew what was coming. I gave him a quick nod. "Versh, we're in. Give us targets." There was a brief silence before Versh replied, his voice tinged with approval. "Very well. We're focusing on taking out their command cruiser. It's heavily shielded, but if you can draw their fighters away, we might stand a chance." "Understood," I said. "Jonah, plot an evasive course around their fighters. Finn, I need all power to shields and engines. Let's keep them busy." "On it," Finn replied, his fingers flying over the controls. With a deep breath, I guided the Vanguard into the fray. Our ship wove through the chaos, dodging bursts of laser fire and narrowly avoiding collisions with debris. The Olran fighters swarmed us, sharp and aggressive, forcing us to rely on speed and agility rather than firepower. Every maneuver, every sharp turn, was a test of our reflexes, and I could feel the sweat prickling on the back of my neck as I kept my grip steady on the controls. "Commander, there's a squadron locking onto us from the port side," Jonah shouted. "On it," I replied, banking sharply to the right, feeling the ship shudder as the inertia pushed us to our limits. Finn's voice came through the comms, filled with a rare note of tension. "Elias, I'm rerouting auxiliary power to boost the shields, but it won't hold for long. We're already running hot." "Just keep us covered," I replied, my eyes scanning the battlefield. As we twisted and turned, I caught sight of the Thal forces regrouping, preparing for their assault on the command cruiser. The Olran forces were too focused on us, distracted by our unpredictable maneuvers. "Versh," I called into the comms. "Now's your chance. They're all over us, but they're ignoring your flank." "Understood," came the reply. "We're moving in. Good luck, Commander Kale." I let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of the fight pressing down on us. The Vanguard was a scout ship, not meant for this kind of direct combat, and I knew we were pushing it to its limits. But with every second we held out, we gave the Thal a better chance of success. "Jonah, how's our aft shield?" "Not good," he replied grimly. "Down to 20%. I gritted my teeth, eyes locked on the swarm of Olran fighters closing in. We had one last play, and it would be a long shot. "Finn, is there any way to push our engines just a little more?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I can try, but it'll burn out half the conduits. We'll be limping after this, Elias." "Do it," I said. The engines roared as Finn pushed them to the red line, and I angled the ship straight through the heart of the Olran formation. The maneuver threw them off, scattering their fighters and giving us a brief reprieve. Through the viewing screen, I saw the Thal forces, led by Commander Versh, were charging straight at the command cruiser, their ships bristling with energy weapons and missiles. The Olran cruiser's shields flickered, struggling to hold against the onslaught. Then, with a final burst of light, the shields collapsed. "Versh, they're open," I shouted, unable to contain the thrill in my voice. The Thal didn't waste a second. Their ships launched a coordinated assault on the cruiser, ripping through its hull with brutal efficiency. Within moments, the Olran vessel was crippled, its engines sputtering, its weapons silenced. The Olran fighters around us began to retreat, falling back to protect their crippled command ship. Jonah let out a breath he'd been holding, and Finn gave a cheer, pumping his fist in the air. "We did it," Finn said, grinning. "We actually did it." I felt a surge of relief wash over me, but I knew this was only the beginning. The Thal rebellion had gained a valuable victory today, but they were still outnumbered, still outgunned, and humanity, by extension, had now made its presence known in the galaxy in a way we could never take back. "Commander Kale," came Versh's voice over the comms. "Your assistance today has earned you the respect of the Thal people. If ever you need allies, we will be there." "Thank you, Commander Versh," I replied, feeling a sense of pride mixed with unease. "But we'd best leave before the Ulran regroup." "Agreed," Versh said. "Safe travels, Vanguard. We'll meet again." The line went silent, and I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of what we'd done settle over me. Jonah looked at me, his gaze steady but questioning. "You realize we're in this now," he said quietly, "whether we want it or not." I nodded, a faint smile on my lips. "I know. And somehow, I think it's only going to get worse." With that, I steered the Vanguard away from the battlefield, setting course for safer territory. We were battered, bruised, and low on fuel, but we'd survived, and I had a feeling this was just the beginning of something much, much larger. As we drifted into the depths of space, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were now part of a story that would echo across the galaxy for years to come. The tension on the bridge was palpable as Jonah stared intently at his console, fingers tapping rapidly, his focus completely absorbed. We were parked on the edge of Ulran-controlled space, deep in an uncharted asteroid belt. It wasn't the safest place to be, but the natural cover of the asteroid field was the only way we could stay hidden long enough for Jonah to crack the code on the transmission we'd intercepted. "Any progress?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Jonah grunted, not looking up. "This encryption is thick, even for Ulran tech. But something about it feels familiar." "Familiar how?" He adjusted his display, dark eyes flickering as he scanned lines of alien text. "It's almost like it's double encoded. Layered encryption. Whoever sent this didn't want it getting intercepted, and if it did, they didn't want it decoded. Or maybe it's bait." Finn's voice piped up from behind us, where he was leaning against the bulkhead, arms crossed. "Last time we intercepted a mysterious message, we ended up in a firefight with 100 Ulran fighters." I couldn't deny he had a point, but something about this transmission felt different. "If it's bait, I said. "But if it's something the Thal were supposed to receive, then it could be vital to their survival. They'll need it." Jonah frowned as he continued working. "This could take a while. Whatever we've stumbled onto, it's important. I'll need more time." We were quiet for a while, letting Jonah work, each of us staring out the viewport at the asteroid belt surrounding us. The silence of space had a way of drawing you into its endless depths, making you question your decisions, your path. But there was no turning back. We were in the fight now. A beep from Jonah's console shattered the silence. "I'm in," he said, leaning forward, his eyes narrowing as he read the decrypted text. His face hardened with each line he scanned. "What is it?" I asked, tension coiling in my gut. He looked up, his expression grave. "It's a set of coordinates and an attack order. The Ulran are planning to ambush the main Thal supply line. If they pull it off, it could cripple the rebellion." I felt a rush of urgency. "We need to get this to Versh." Finn straightened, eyes sharp. "You're suggesting we go back into Ulran space?" I looked between them, feeling the weight of the decision. The Thal rebellion was on the brink, and this information could give them the edge they needed. But going back into Ulran territory would mean navigating some of the most heavily guarded space in the galaxy. "Exactly," I said, steeling myself. "If we don't deliver this intel, the rebellion could be crushed. The Ulran aren't expecting us, so we'll have the element of surprise." Jonah gave a terse nod. "Then we'd better move fast." The Vanguard slipped out of the asteroid belt and into Ulran territory, our engines running at minimum thrust to avoid detection. We kept the ship's heat and energy signatures low, a near impossible task for a vessel our size, but we were lucky to have Finn on board. He'd modified the Vanguard over the years, adding stealth systems that most scout ships wouldn't have dreamed of. Still, we were a single ship against the Ulran Empire, and every step we took felt like walking through a minefield. "Entering the dead zone," Finn muttered, eyes on his console as he kept our signature in check. The dead zone was a swath of unmonitored space on the fringes of Olran territory, a sliver of darkness where patrols rarely ventured. It was the only safe corridor we could use to reach the Thal outpost. We navigated in silence, passing perilously close to several Olran patrols. Every time I saw one of their ships, a chill ran down my spine. One wrong move, one stray signal, and we'd be facing an entire armada. But each time, Jonah's sharp eyes spotted them before they saw us, and Finn's modifications kept us hidden. As we neared the edge of the dead zone, a flashing light on Jonah's console caught his attention. "We're not alone," he murmured, voice barely above a whisper. I leaned over his shoulder, following his gaze. An Olran cruiser was moving on a parallel course, close enough to pick up any errant signal we might transmit. My pulse quickened as we drifted even closer, every instinct telling me to pull away. "Jonah, get us out of its detection range," I whispered. Jonah nodded, fingers dancing over the controls as he adjusted our trajectory. We moved in a wide arc, slipping just beyond the cruiser's sensors. The tension on the bridge was thick enough to cut with a knife as we drifted past, holding our breath as the cruiser continued on its path, oblivious to our presence. Finally, the ship vanished from our scanners, and we let out a collective breath. "That was too close," Finn muttered. I gave him a reassuring nod, though my heart was still pounding. "We're almost there." The Thal outpost came into view, a series of angular, heavily fortified structures hidden within a small moon's cavernous terrain. It wasn't much, but it was well hidden, and that was all the Thal needed to keep the Olran guessing. As we approached, a transmission crackled over the comm. "Unidentified vessel, state your intentions." "This is Commander Elias Kale of the Vanguard," I replied. "We have critical intelligence for Commander Versh." There was a pause before the reply came. "You are cleared for docking. But be advised Commander Versh does not trust easily." I nodded, glancing at Jonah and Finn. "Keep sharp." The docking bay of the Thal outpost was cold and dimly lit, a stark contrast to the sleek technology of the Olran. As we disembarked, a squad of Thal soldiers met us, weapons at the ready. Their leader, a tall figure with a sharp gaze and a scarred face, stepped forward. "Commander Kale," he said, his tone neutral. "Commander Versh is waiting." The Thal soldiers escorted us to a meeting chamber deep within the base. There, seated at a metal table covered in battle plans and data readouts, was Commander Versh. He was a broad-shouldered figure with a gaze that could cut through steel, his green skin a dull, mottled color in the dim light. His eyes locked onto me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Commander Kale," he said, his voice even but cold. "It's unusual for a human to venture so far into Olran space. I assume you have a good reason." "We intercepted an Olran transmission," I replied, holding up the data chip. "They're planning an ambush on your supply line. If you don't act fast, you'll be left with nothing to fight with." Versh's eyes flickered with interest as he took the chip. He inserted it into a console and scanned the information, his expression growing darker with each passing moment. When he looked up, his suspicion had given way to something close to grudging respect. "This is valuable intel," he admitted, "but why would a human risk his life to help us?" "Because I believe the Olran need to be stopped," I said simply. "And right now, the Thal are the only ones willing to fight them." Versh studied me, his gaze sharp. "Bold words, Commander Kale, but we've learned not to trust easily. What do you want in return?" "Nothing," I replied, though I knew that wasn't entirely true. "Just an understanding. We're allies in this fight, whether you like it or not." Versh's gaze lingered on me for a moment longer before he nodded. "Very well. We're planning an assault on an Olran supply station, but we lack the means to bypass their defenses. Perhaps you and your crew can assist." Versh led us to the command center, where a holographic display showed the Olran supply station, a heavily fortified structure with thick energy shields and a network of patrol ships. The defenses were formidable, and any direct assault would be suicide. "We've tried hitting their supply lines before, But they're always one step ahead, Versh said, his frustration evident. Every time we move, they reinforce their defenses. I studied the display, noting the weak points in the Ulran formation. They're used to fighting in a straightforward way, expecting you to come at them head-on. But what if we attacked from the inside? Versh raised an eyebrow. Inside? A guerrilla-style ambush, I explained. Instead of hitting them with one large force, we divide into smaller groups, each one striking a specific part of the station. They won't expect it, and by the time they realize what's happening, we'll be gone. Versh's face betrayed a flicker of intrigue. Your tactics are unorthodox, but they might work. Not just might, I said, feeling a spark of confidence. They will. Versh considered my proposal for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well, Commander Kale, I will assign a squadron to follow your lead. But if you betray us, know that the Thal do not forgive easily. I wouldn't expect anything less, I replied, meeting his gaze. The Thal squadron joined us, each pilot flying modified fighters outfitted with whatever makeshift cloaking devices Finn could rig together. Finn had been working tirelessly on the Vanguard, using bits of Thal tech to build a prototype cloaking system that could mask us for short periods just long enough to evade detection. As we approached the Ulran supply station, we split into smaller groups, each squadron moving to their assigned positions around the station. The Thal fighters were tense, unused to operating in such a fragmented formation, but their determination was evident. They trusted us, even if they didn't fully understand our tactics. Ready? I asked over the comm, glancing at Finn and Jonah. Ready, Finn replied, sounding surprisingly confident. Jonah simply nodded, his face set in determination. I gave the signal, and we launched our assault. The Thal fighters struck the outer defenses, each group focusing on a specific weak point. Within moments, the Ulran were scrambling to defend, their confusion evident as they struggled to respond to the scattered attacks. Hold position, I commanded, watching as the Ulran forces fell into disarray. Wait until they're fully committed, then hit them again. The Thal fighters moved in waves, each one striking with precision and speed. The Ulran defenses crumbled under the pressure, their cohesion breaking as they struggled to keep up with our tactics. It was a risky maneuver, but it was paying off. The soft hum of the Vanguard's engines was a familiar, calming presence, a reminder that we were in control of our destiny, at least for the moment. We had just completed a resupply at a neutral trading station, one of those places where ships of all kinds from the Ulran Empire to rogue freighters came and went, where alliances could be made, and secrets were traded as often as supplies. The station was a floating mix of commerce and diplomacy, where laws were more of a suggestion than a rule. I stood at the observation window, gazing out into the vastness of space. The Thal had been holding their ground, but every day it felt like they were losing more than they were gaining. The Ulran Empire had far superior resources, technology, and sheer numbers, and they knew how to use them. The Thal rebellion was holding on by its teeth, but I didn't know how much longer they could last. Elias, we've got something, Jonah's voice crackled over the comm, drawing me away from my thoughts. Go ahead, I replied, turning toward the console where Jonah sat hunched over his screen. I intercepted a transmission, Jonah said. It's encrypted, but it's from the Ulran military. I think it's about their next big move. I walked over, standing behind him as he worked. His fingers danced over the keyboard, decrypting the transmission bit by bit. The hum of the station seemed to quiet, the air around me thick with tension. There, Jonah said, the screen flashing with decrypted data. It's an offensive. The Ulran are planning an attack on Thal civilian settlements. My stomach dropped. The Thal were already fighting a losing battle against the Ulran military, but targeting civilian settlements meant the Ulran were trying to break the rebellion completely. If they succeeded, it would decimate the Thal and crush their spirit. They would have nowhere to run. How soon? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jonah's eyes scanned the data quickly. 3 days. The Ulran fleet is mobilizing as we speak. I didn't have to look at Finn to know he was already working on the next question. How do we stop them? Okay, we need to intercept them, I said, my voice firm. We can't let that fleet reach the Thal. Jonah's head snapped up. You're crazy. Do you have any idea what we're up against? The Olran fleet is at least 10 times the size of ours. We don't have the firepower to go up against that. Finn nodded in agreement. This isn't just a suicide mission, it's a death sentence. We'll be outnumbered, outgunned, and we'll have no way to fight back. I understood the gravity of the situation, but I also understood the stakes. If we didn't act, the Thal would lose everything. I'm not asking for a full-on assault. We're going to take out their flagship, disable it, cause confusion, give the Thal time to evacuate their civilians. And how do you plan to do that? Jonah asked skeptically. You're talking about a heavily guarded flagship, with a fleet backing it up. We're not even a warship, Elias. I know, I said, my jaw setting in determination. But we have something they don't. We have the element of surprise. We'd learned a lot about the Olran in our time spent behind enemy lines. They relied heavily on their superiority in numbers and firepower, but they were also predictably arrogant. They expected victory, and that confidence often left them vulnerable to tactics they hadn't planned for. I looked over at Finn. Can you make the cloaking device work for this? Finn scratched his chin thoughtfully. It's going to be a tight fit. I've got the prototype working, but it's still experimental. The energy consumption is off the charts. If we're spotted even once while we're close to that flagship, we're done for. It's the only chance we have, I said. We need to get within range of their flagship without being seen, disable their systems, and throw their fleet into chaos. Jonah shook his head. You're asking us to commit to a plan where the odds are stacked against us, with no backup and a ticking clock. I looked him in the eye, feeling the weight of what I was asking. This isn't about odds, Jonah. It's about doing the right thing. The Thal need us. Jonah paused, the skepticism in his eyes slowly giving way to something else. You're right. If we don't do something, they're finished. All right, let's do it. Finn didn't say anything at first. Instead, he just nodded, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of excitement and fear. I'll get the cloaking device ready. The Vanguard was far from a warship, but we had made do with what we had. Finn had spent hours tweaking and refining the cloaking device using Thal technology, and it was now functional at least for short periods of time. Our strategy was simple: infiltrate the Olran fleet, disable their flagship, and escape before they realized what happened. We spent the next few hours preparing for the mission, the crew working in a kind of quiet, determined efficiency. Jonah ran simulations, mapping out the most efficient path through the Olran fleet, while Finn worked on fine-tuning the cloaking device. I spent the time reviewing the data on the Olran fleet's movements, trying to anticipate their every move. The hardest part wasn't preparing the ship or the plan, it was knowing that this could be the last mission we ever undertook. The odds were stacked against us, and the risks were immense. But I couldn't back down. The Thal needed us. By the time we were ready to launch, the station's external sensors had detected us leaving the docking bay. No one on the station would care if we didn't return. This wasn't a mission of diplomacy, and the neutral trading station was as neutral as they came. But the people of the Thal settlements, they were counting on us. The journey toward the Olran fleet was tense. We had to navigate through asteroid fields and avoid Olran patrols, moving with all the caution of a predator stalking its prey. Every once in a while, the hull of the Vanguard would shudder as it passed too close to an asteroid, but we held steady. We couldn't afford to make a single mistake. As we approached the fleet, Finn activated the cloaking device. The ship's systems flickered for a moment, and then the Vanguard was invisible to any sensors. My heart raced as we neared the flagship, the massive ship looming before us like a predator waiting to strike. Jonah's voice was calm but tight over the comms. We're in range. If we make it past this point, we'll be close enough to disable their systems. I nodded. Stay sharp. This is it. The tension on the bridge was palpable. Jonah's fingers danced over the controls, inputting commands and keeping an eye on the fleet's movements. Finn stood at his station, monitoring the cloaking system, ready to make adjustments if anything went wrong. I was at the helm, my hands gripping the controls as I piloted the Vanguard through the heart of the Ulran fleet. We moved slowly, staying just out of detection range. But the closer we got to the flagship, the harder it became to maintain our invisibility. Finn kept adjusting the power to the cloaking device, pushing the limits of what the technology could handle. The ship's engines strained as we neared the flagship, a massive, imposing vessel surrounded by dozens of smaller support ships. "We're almost there," Jonah said. "Get ready." We were close enough now that I could see the flagship's hull details in my viewfinder. The enemy was practically in front of us, and yet we were still invisible. If we timed this right, we could disable their systems without them ever knowing we were there. "Now," I said, my voice cold with purpose. "Fire everything we've got." Finn slammed the button to activate the attack systems, and a barrage of firepower erupted from the Vanguard. The concentrated blasts hit the flagship's weak points, sending sparks flying and causing the massive ship to stagger as its shields flared and flickered. But we didn't stop. Jonah kept firing, targeting the core of the ship's internal systems, and I pushed the Vanguard's engines to the limit, maneuvering us just out of range of the counterattacks. The flagship's systems began to fail. Its shields sputtered, and power coursed erratically through the ship. Chaos erupted within their fleet, confusion and panic spreading like wildfire. The smaller ships scrambled to regain control, but the damage had already been done. "Now get us out of here," I barked, heart pounding as the Vanguard's engines roared to life, the ship tearing away from the wreckage. The Ulran fleet was thrown into disarray, their flagship crippled and their forces in chaos. We had done it, we had turned the tide, but we had paid a price. The Vanguard's hull groaned as the damage from the retaliatory fire began to take its toll. "We've got to get out of here," Finn said urgently, his fingers flying across the console. "The cloak is starting to fail." "Hold together," I muttered, pulling the Vanguard into a tight evasive maneuver as the remaining Ulran ships began to focus their fire on us. We didn't stop running until we were deep in neutral space, the Ulran fleet far behind us, but the damage to the Vanguard was severe. We had pulled off a miracle, but the victory came at a cost. Back at the Thal outpost, we were hailed as heroes. The Thal had evacuated their civilians, and their rebellion had been given a chance to regroup, all thanks to our actions. But as I stood on the bridge, looking at the battered hull of the Vanguard, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just crossed a point of no return. The Thal had gained hope, but at what cost? The war was far from over. But one thing was certain, we were in this for the long haul now. Humanity had made its mark on the galaxy, and there was no turning back.